This week on ICN, the stories you should have heard but didn't. Political turmoil around the world is a reminder to be prepared. Is inflation almost zero, as the government claims? Montana making the feds ask permission to police their state. Russia instituting a national ID card in 2012. Those stories and more next on Informed Citizen News. Hello and welcome to ICN, Informed Citizen News, week of February 28, 2011. As stated in our intro, we attempt to present news that should have been covered in the mainstream media. The uprisings in Egypt and other parts of the Middle East over the past month certainly have made national headlines in America. This week, we'll focus on underreported aspects of the civil unrest. Political upheaval can often have the appearance of a national disaster, such as an earthquake, flood, hurricane, or pandemic. Just like natural disasters, political unrest can cause delayed police response and interruption to basic services like phone, internet, and electricity. If there's enough chaos, then even the food supply chain may be interrupted. For the average citizen, it can be a perilous situation to live in or around affected areas, so being prepared is prudent. Let's now look at the past month in Egypt and how fast society can break down. During the chaos in Egypt, police stations were abandoned and their arsenals were stripped by looters, enhancing the criminal element's ability to commit violence on peaceful citizens. Because police were focused on protesters, street thugs took advantage of the lack of police response to loot their neighbors. You should note that average citizens in Egypt are unarmed. While owning a firearm is legal, they are very expensive, and it's very hard to get government approval. People had to form neighborhood patrols armed with sticks and knives in order to protect life and property. Reported violent crimes such as muggings and rapes skyrocketed during the riots. Prisons were attacked, and thousands of escaped convicts had been reported, although not confirmed. Governments throughout the Middle East began to hoard food supplies. The common motivation among political protesters was high unemployment along with rising food prices. In a panic, vulnerable governments believe that hoarding food stocks will give them flexibility to appease their people when necessary. The result is that food becomes harder to get for the general public in a self-fulfilling prophecy. The current revolts in Egypt and other countries are relatively mild when compared to others throughout history. The lesson one can take is that, like natural disasters, political turmoil can arrive suddenly and have unpredictable consequences. It's just another reason to have a disaster preparedness plan for you and your family. As a side note, the person touted as the de facto leader of the protesters, Mohammed El-Baradei, is well known in the international community and belongs to the Board of Trustees of the International Crisis Group, a somewhat shadowy NGO bankrolled by the likes of Carnegie, Ford, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as George Soros's Open Society Institute. This looks to be an example of the establishment inserting their guy in front of a so-called grassroots movement. Economic researcher Chris Martenson published an article in Financial Sense titled, "Inflation is so much worse than we're told." He summarized the shortcomings of the Bureau of Labor Statistics approach in calculating the inflation rate as represented by the Consumer Price Index. Inflation is a complicated topic. Under the current global economic turmoil, one should have a general understanding of the true measurement of inflation. Mr. Martenson identifies the sleight of hand that is used by the government through the use of several statistical manipulation methods like hedonics, which tries to account for improving quality of products over time. Substitution, which is the act of switching to lower-cost items when prices surge on preferred items. For example, when the prices of prime steak rises, the government will switch it out of the analysis with lower-cost hamburger. And another method, called weighting, which is increasing or decreasing the weight given to items that make up the CPI. For example, the government, through weighting modifications, reduces the percent of income a person expends on health care from a real 17.6% to an arbitrary 6.5%. This reduction results in the assumption that each person pays only $239 per year toward their health premiums. Yes, that's $239 per year. Do you know anyone that only pays $239 a year for health insurance? Mr. Martinson's article is very easy to read and conveys that the American people are getting manipulated inflation statistics from the government. When the government has incentive to underreport inflation, the conflict of interest should be eliminated by taking the average rate of inflation as calculated by multiple independent statisticians. A while back, Montana passed a law that established that any firearms manufactured, sold, and possessed inside the state are exempt from federal regulations. Now, there's a new bill being proposed in the Montana State Legislature. It establishes the state's local county sheriffs as the preeminent law enforcement authority in their jurisdictions, and federal agents such as those working for the IRS, FBI, DEA, ATF, and others would be required to get permission from the local sheriff before they could take any action in a county. If the federal agency did not seek permission from the local sheriff prior to an action, then the persons involved must be prosecuted by the county attorney. For kidnapping, if an arrest or attempted arrest occurred. For trespass, if a search or attempted search occurred. For theft, if a seizure or attempted seizure occurred. And for any homicide offense, if loss of life occurred. The persons involved must also be charged with any other applicable criminal offense. Montana reminds us that the states created the federal government and are rightly justified in exercising their sovereign authority within their borders. In 2008, Fox News excluded Ron Paul from a critical Republican primary debate in New Hampshire in order to showcase establishment candidates. Besides the fact that the week before, Ron Paul was polling higher in New Hampshire than some of those candidates who were allowed in the debate. Fox News had stated at the time that in order to participate in the New Hampshire state Republican primary debate, a candidate was required to be above 10% in national polls. I'm sure New Hampshire voters appreciated the wisdom of Fox News letting other states decide who should debate in their own primary. Jump forward to 2011 in a case of manipulated journalism. During an interview in February, a Fox News host confronted Ron Paul on why he was booed by the CPAC crowd upon the announcement that he had won that organization's presidential straw poll. Problem was, the clip of boos that was played for the interview was from the prior year's conference. Fox News has demonstrated a habit of accidentally mixing up video clips that skews the story in favor of the Republican establishment. Recently, Fox showed incorrect video of Sarah Palin getting large crowds on her book tour. Fox denies that these mix-ups are premeditated to pump up establishment candidates or causes. On March 3rd, the Utah State House of Representatives passed a bill that would recognize gold and silver coins as legal tender. The bill now moves on to the Utah State Senate. The new law would not require anyone to accept gold or silver coins, but if two parties agree that gold or silver is to be the form of payment, then the state of Utah would recognize that contract. Also, because Utah sees gold and silver coins as legal tender, they would no longer tax its sale, nor tax its capital gain. Representative Ken Ivory said, for example, that a 1960 John F. Kennedy half-dollar coin, 90% silver, would have bought 3 gallons of gasoline with its face value in 1960. But the value of the silver in it today would buy about 5 gallons of gas, while the face value would only buy a fraction of a gallon. Ivory added, the bill is a way for us to preserve, for the citizens of Utah, the purchasing power of the money they hold. The city of Atlanta settles a lawsuit that relates to confiscation and excessive force used by police to stop a citizen from filming them in public. In the original incident in 2009, where an arrest was being filmed, the cameraman was approached by 2 officers who forcefully took the camera and deleted the video. The officers were reprimanded and one was suspended without pay for 4 days. The city has also agreed to pay victims $40,000. A representative from CopWatch, an organization focused on monitoring police while they perform in public, stated, just about anything the police are doing out in the public, they should be comfortable being videotaped because they're simply performing their duties. If some aren't comfortable with it, it makes you wonder why. Atlanta police have formally stated that they will no longer interfere with anyone trying to film them in public. Russia will implement a universal ID card next year that will link every person to a government-run database. The ID card is intended to be used for banking, medical insurance, government services, and public transportation. The Russian government will be able to monitor everything that person does or where they go in almost real time. Similar projects are being considered in India and Mexico. Universal ID cards are coming. The question is, are you going to be a willing participant? Thanks for joining us. From all of us at Informed Citizen News, we'll see you next time.